Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. An instant reaction video. The Packers schedule has been released, or at least, through sources reporting all that good stuff. Official release comes a little later on tonight, I guess, depends on when you watch this video. I'll put the schedule up on the screen for you with a graphic I created, then we'll kind of roll through a couple of things that stand out. So here's the schedule, and here's one thing I love. Goody said all offseason, urgency. He believes this team is ready to compete for championships. Goody said that a couple of days after last season ended. Green Bay loses to Philadelphia wild card weekend. And shortly after that, Goody's given his end-of-the-year presser. And one of his quotes that he said that kind of opened up some eyes for people was that he said, I think it's about time we start competing for championships. And, of course, the Packers typically in the playoff hunt, a postseason team, things of that nature. But Goody rarely, if ever, has spoken so directly or so bluntly like that. And you look at how the schedule played out. And for Goody to say that in January and then bring it up again at the owners' meetings later on this offseason, you get to start with 2 home games. And the Packers have never started week 1 at home in the Matt LaFleur era. It has been a few years, quite a few years for Green Bay since it had a week 1 home game. Usually they start on the road. Of course, last year we know it was a neutral site in Brazil against Philadelphia. Green Bay will start its season against the Detroit Lions in week 1 and then come off a short week 2, and play Thursday night football against the Washington Commanders. The same Detroit Lions that Green Bay went 0-2 against last year. The same Detroit Lions that took the number 1 seed in the NFC that lost to the Commanders. Rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels in Washington eventually getting all the way to the NFC Championship. One of the last 4 teams standing. And so for all offseason, we're wondering certain things. Is the pass rusher group going to step up? What's the cornerback room going to look like? Now we got some young pieces filtering in at wide receiver, Matthew Golden and Savion Williams. But the overarching theme all offseason was, hey, it's time to start competing for championships. Show some urgency. We heard that word used frequently in the offseason by Goody, urgency. Well, starting out of the gates going Lions, Commanders, but both at home, we're going to see if Green Bay has some of that championship mettle. We're going to see them get tested early on. There's no gimmies in the NFL. There's no layups. There just aren't. But if you look at, you want to talk like weaker points in the schedule, like I don't know what to make of the Cleveland Browns this year, right? Like Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, they draft 2 quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders. All signs are kind of pointing. You look at the division they play in with Baltimore and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. All indicators are pointing towards Cleveland probably having a down year. That's who Green Bay gets in week 3. Its first road game is in Cleveland. But again, you talk urgency, time to start competing for championships. Start the year with Detroit and Washington. Couple of good measuring stick games right out of the gate. Instead of starting with a Cleveland or Carolina who's, could surprise this year, maybe be in contention in the NFC South if Bryce Young takes another step forward. But Green Bay is going to start with 2 heavy hitters before going on the road to Cleveland. I hate the bye week. Week 5, I hate where it's at. I don't hate the bye week. I hate where it's at. Week 5 is super early in the season. I know Matt LaFleur has said in the past he prefers it to be later on. Not a good spot, I don't think, for Green Bay. It's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. Getting the Week 5 bye. Week 8, you're circling it. It's appointment television. This is all hindering on Aaron Rodgers' decision, but the league putting Packers-Steelers Week 8 Sunday Night Football in Pittsburgh, everyone assumes, including Pittsburgh's front office, we've heard it from their front office, that they believe Aaron Rodgers eventually will be with the team, sign with the team, ink a deal, be their quarterback this year. That is absolute appointment television. Had to be a primetime matchup. There were rumblings this offseason that Steelers-Packers was going to be a game played in Ireland. It sounded like that was actually starting to come to fruition and that there was some truth behind those rumblings. Aaron Rodgers sort of pivoting, and now really it sounds like where else would he go at this point in the offseason? It's either going to be Pittsburgh or retirement, you would think, for Rodgers. But Week 8 Sunday Night Football, assuming Rodgers ends up in Pittsburgh, that will be just absolute appointment television. 2 weeks after that, you get another crack at the team that you went 0-2 against, another team you went 0-2 against last year, the Philadelphia Eagles. You lost to them in Week 1 in Brazil. You lost to them in Wild Card Weekend in Philadelphia. Your year was bookended by 2 losses to the Eagles. Now they come to Lambeau Field, Week 10, Monday Night Football. That'll be a big one for the Packers. And then one thing that stands out, I'll put the schedule up on the screen again. You look at how things finish, and Green Bay has 5 of its last 7 games against NFC North teams, including a 3-game stretch where you go at home against Minnesota, the Lions on the road on Thanksgiving, and then you come back and host the Bears. But then 2 weeks later, you play the Bears again on the road on a Saturday. 5 of the last 7 against NFC North teams. And if you were hoping for some wiggle room or a little leniency in the schedule, right? I just said there's no gimmies, there's no layups in the NFL. I've never believed in that. But if you were hoping for some lesser competition in those other 2 games down the stretch, because these NFC North games are going to be pivotal. Like, I think most people believe Green Bay is going to be in the hunt for the NFC North this year. And if that's the case, those 5 games in the last 7 weeks, at home against the Vikings week 12, week 13 Lions Thanksgiving in Detroit, week 14 at home against the Bears, week 16 at the Bears on a Saturday, then you finish week 18 on the road again against Minnesota. Those games very well could decide who reigns supreme in the NFC North. But the 2 games peppered in during that 7-week stretch that aren't NFC North opponents, you're talking about going on the road at Denver, never an easy place to play. Bo Nix as a rookie, Sean Payton the head coach, led him to the playoffs last year. And then your other matchup that isn't a division rival down the stretch, week 17 at home against the Baltimore Ravens. That's a brutal march to the finish line for Green Bay. Again, the last 7 games, Vikings, Lions, Bears, Broncos, Bears, Ravens, Vikings. And I know the joke that Packers fans want to make is, the Bears games, those will be layups. Well, they came into Lambeau week 18 last year and won on a walk-off field goal, and it took a blocked field goal for Green Bay to beat them in Chicago. And I know some of the starters were rested in the second half of that game in week 18. They go out, they hire Ben Johnson. They believe in what they have. They take Colston Loveland, the tight end, to really up the ante with the offense in the first round. They take Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri, in round 2. The Bears, to me, that's no joke. Like, I think the Bears will be super, super competitive at a minimum this year, and at a maximum could be right around in the hunt for a playoff spot. Are they division title contender? I don't know. I don't know if they've taken, that leap, and everyone's chasing Detroit right now. And so 5 of the last 7 coming against division foes, including 3 in a row from week 12 to 14, at home against the Vikings, at the Lions, at home against the Bears. Green Bay, I mean, it's a tough stretch, but there's a part of you that you're like, you wouldn't have it any other way. I will say this too. I should have pointed this out earlier. Starting the year against the Lions, week 1 right out of the gates at Lambeau, I think could play into Green Bay's advantage from one perspective. The Lions are bringing back the bulk of that roster from a year ago, right? But Ben Johnson, your offensive coordinator, is gone. He's now the head coach in Chicago. Aaron Glenn, your defensive coordinator, is now gone. He's the head coach of the New York Jets. They'll have training camp, preseason, to really staple things in with these new coaches, their new OC, their new DC, tinker with some things, filter some things out, filter some new things in that they want to do schematically. I truly believe getting the Lions week 1, when they had that much turnover, again, you're losing your OC, a big part of the brains with the operation, and you're losing your DC, a big vocal presence, and an X's and O's guy in Aaron Glenn. To get Detroit week 1, when sure, the roster is going to look primarily the same in most spots, especially the premier spots. Jared Goff didn't go anywhere. Montgomery and Gibbs are back on offense. Laporta, Sewell's there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, and on defense, Aiden Hutchinson. It'll be his first game back since the broken leg against Dallas early last year. And you look at Kirby Joseph still there. All these premier pieces for the Lions pretty much back in place. But you're talking about, even if you want to say the system will be similar to what Ben Johnson ran offensively, there's going to be tweaks. And if you want to say things are going to be similar defensively to what Aaron Glenn was doing, there's going to be tweaks. There's going to be growing pains. There's going to be a curve that Detroit has to take. And so I think to get them week 1, as they try to figure that out on the fly, could play into Green Bay's hands. Because Detroit, to me, is still going to be very, very good. But you can't, to me, overlook them losing their OC and DC and them trying to figure things out in that first game that matters, see what works, what doesn't, what adjustments are being made, what looks different with the offense and defense. I think for the Packers to get them week 1, it could be a blessing in disguise for the Packers, who are trying to, get a little payback after losing both games to Detroit a year ago, a very, very, very good Detroit team. I'll put the schedule up again, and let me know what stands out to you guys. I'm just doing a quick video again on the schedule release. You look at primetime games, you've got a Thursday night against the Commanders at home, Sunday Night Football at the Steelers, Monday Night Football at home against the Eagles, Thanksgiving against the Lions, and then that standalone game, Week 16 in Chicago. I like it. It's a good number. There's some flex options, obviously, later on in the season. I do look back again at that stretch run, and that's tough. To finish 2 with the Vikings, 2 with the Bears, 1 with the Lions, and then Broncos, Ravens is just Green Bay early on will be tested, and at the end will be heavily, heavily tested. I think if you wanted to find sort of like a softer spot in the schedule, and it's not a slap in the face to any of these teams, but if you do look week 3 to week 9, 2 road games in a row, but at the Browns, at the Cowboys, both, on paper, very winnable games for Green Bay. We know all the success they've had playing in Jerry World, even with Jordan Love, that big playoff win a couple years ago. And then you get to, sigh of relief, little collect your breath, collect your gatherings. You get a week 5 bye, which I hate. But then you come out of that, you get an extra week to prepare for Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And then you're at the Cardinals, who, again, you talk winnable game. Steelers will be crazy environment, especially if Rodgers is the quarterback. And then at home against the Panthers. Like, if you want to find a softer spot in the schedule, I think if you look weeks 3 through 9, Browns, Cowboys bye, come out of the bye extra week to prepare for Cincy, who should be pretty good. And then Cardinals, Steelers, Panthers, that's kind of the spot where Green Bay, you would hope, is throwing some heavy haymakers and trying to rack up some wins. I think, worst case scenario is you come out these first 2 weeks and the Lions prove that they're still looking down at you and you're still looking up at them, and they come and take care of business week 1, and then you let that affect you on a short week and welcoming in Washington on a Thursday night. Like, it's not impossible that Green Bay could be 0-2 heading to Cleveland week 3, but I think it's also just as possible that they could be 2-0. I think 1-1, most people would sign up for that. I know they're both at home, so ideally you would want to be 2-0. But coming out of the gates firing with those 2 teams, Detroit and Washington, will be 2 massive, massive tests for Green Bay, and I'm very, very curious to see how they come out of that. A couple games I didn't mention. Well, one, Week 11 at the Giants. That far along in the season, it'll be interesting to see who's the quarterback. Is it still Russell Wilson? Is it Jackson Dart? That defensive front is going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of teams. Green Bay's offensive line should be tested. They already had Thibodeau, and they got Burns, and they've got Lawrence, and then, they draft Abdul Carter out of Penn State with the number 3 overall pick. Like, that defensive front is absolutely no joke, top-tier caliber for the Giants. So that'll be an interesting matchup. And then what else did we miss? I mentioned the Cardinals game Week 7 in Arizona. That's a stadium that, when the Packers have played there in years past, and it's not every year, it's not even every other year, but Packers fans show up loud in that stadium in Arizona. A lot of Packer fans living out in that part of the country. And then Week 9 against Carolina, I think the Week 9 game against Carolina is fascinating for one big reason to me. Well, 2. 1, I'm interested to see the jump that Bryce Young might take. This year, I still have a lot of hope that Bryce Young could be a pretty damn good quarterback in the NFL. They're trying to surround him with more and more talent, more and more competence, and a better offensive line. But you look at the games that the Panthers are sandwiched in with. Week 8, you're at the Steelers. Whether you want to admit it or not, and I think everyone will, that is going to be a heavy emotional game if Rodgers is the quarterback. Rodgers playing the Packers for the first time since being traded to the Jets. He was there for 2 years, and you're talking about a primetime matchup, Sunday Night Football at Pittsburgh, who, if they have Rodgers, you're definitely talking about a playoff team at a minimum. You look at the last few years, and Pittsburgh's had a revolving door at starting quarterback. They still make the playoffs. They hover around 500 and then figure it out, make the playoffs. Sometimes they figure it out early and then falter late going into the postseason. But Week 8 against the Steelers, and then Week 10 on Monday Night Football back at home against Philadelphia, the defending champs. That Week 9 game against Carolina, one thing to keep in mind, you talk about a game that you can look past just mentally. Like, the Packers aren't going to say it, obviously, but that'd be an easy game to be like, man, we just played a game where we emptied the clip, emptied the tank against Pittsburgh on Sunday night and Aaron Rodgers. We've got Philly next week on Monday Night Football coming to our house. Let's, sit back, relax. Carolina's coming here. We'll take care of business. That'll be easy. No. That can't be the mindset going into that Week 9 game against Carolina. So I think just how it fit into the equation, 2 primetime games against 2 heavy hitters. You're talking potentially Rodgers and the Steelers, and then Monday night in Week 10 against Philadelphia. That middle game of the Panthers can't be a game that you let drop. If you're Green Bay, you just can't. So yeah, that's the schedule. We'll have a probably longer version of this at some point in time, breakdown. But that urgency word that was used, it's time to start competing for championships, as Goody said. Let's see it. Week 1 against Detroit at home. Week 2, Thursday Night Football against the Commanders at home. Ready to go. Just go out there and prove it. And then that back burner part of the schedule, Vikings, Lions, Bears, Broncos, Bears, Ravens, Vikings to finish is brutal. But you had to play them all at some point. We knew who the opponents were for months, and this is just how the schedule filtered out. My biggest gripe, the Week 5 bye. And it's not like the league's, pinning it on Green Bay or they have it out for the Packers. That's just, I think I said that's how the cookie crumbles. That's how it crumbled. Week 5 bye for the Packers. So we'll see. That is the schedule, though. I'll put it up on the screen one more time. Let me know what you think in the comments. It is Mitch I am on YouTube. Always appreciate all the support. We'll see you next time.